When you think of Neil Peart, you probably think of precision, structure, and almost architectural drumming, but Peart himself pointed to a very different influence, Phil Collins, particularly during the early years of Genesis. And here's the big question: did one of rock's most feel-based drummers actually shape one of its most precise ones? On the surface, this doesn't make a lot of sense, because Phil Collins, especially in his early Genesis years, played with a kind of fluidity that you don't usually associate with Neil Peart. His parts are very spontaneous, they float around the music, and he's well known for saying that he had a great sense of improvisation. Peart, on the other hand, is known primarily for control and study. His playing feels very designed, very deliberate, very engineered, and he is often quoted as saying that it's practice and composition that made his playing what it was, rather than his innate ability to improvise. Peart's special approach to drumming requires a specific way of looking at the role of percussion within the context of a band. And there are things that he does that make it very difficult for another drummer to follow him. And this is of particular consequence given that Annika Niles is going to be taking his place on the upcoming Rush reunion tour. I have a video in the members section that talks specifically about what parts of the song Tom Sawyer will be extremely difficult for Annika to play. Check it out in the members section by hitting the join button below. So why would Neil Peart point to Phil Collins as an influence? The answer isn't in how they played, it's in how they thought about drums. So in early Genesis, Phil Collins wasn't just keeping time, he was treating the drums like a melodic instrument. And there were three main elements of Phil Collins's early style, in addition to the improvisational spontaneity I was talking about. The first is his phrasing, which is intricate but also accessible, and he prioritizes what the drums are saying rather than how loud they're saying it. Another thing that he does is he uses his drum parts to guide transition sections of the songs. Of course, his most famous fill, In the Air Tonight, is a great example of this, very dramatic one, but he does it a lot. Another one is that he uses drums for emotional expression. In other words, he tells a story within the context of the song by the way that he uses his drums, and early Genesis is full of examples like this. Turn It On Again is a great example of how the drums are really driving the song's narrative. But even later Genesis, something like No Son of Mine, with its addition of electronic drums, still uses the rhythm and percussive elements to push narrative. Now, this is where Neil Peart really comes in, because Peart never copied Collins, but he kind of translated his approach. He took the musical thinking and applied it with his own personality. So, even though Collins was very fluid, there was a structure beneath that fluidity that Peart seized on. Rush songs like Tom Sawyer or Xanadu, or even back to 2112, the composition, the framework of the drumming was musical, not just rhythmic. When Peart talks about Collins as an influence, not talking about copying specific fills or even Collins's specific approach. So, did Phil Collins really shape Neil Peart's drumming? Well, probably not in the way that might seem most obvious, in a direct technical way. He didn't shape Peart's technical playing, but he shaped his approach to drumming. And once you hear that, you start to realize that some of the most precise drumming in rock may have actually started with spontaneity, feel, and improvisation. And this raises a bigger question. If this approach to drumming evolved from Collins through Peart, who's carrying it forward today? Let me know in the comments.